So we're staying in this first chapter of Luke as we journey in Advent. And for this morning, I just really want to narrow the reading into that first verse that we read, verse 46, and simply talk about magnifying and expressing joy. My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior. So we're just gonna work ourselves through these two notions, magnifying and joy. So what we do know that in Luke, Mary has a substantial role, and that's unlike the other Gospels. In Mark's Gospel, there's nothing said of Mary or Jesus because that begins with Jesus' baptism in the Jordan. In Matthew, there's a bit more that Mary plays, but she seems to be more just simply a character in that narrative where Joseph takes the prominent role. And in John's Gospel, she's never even called by name. Luke pays attention to Mary's significance. Now, within our tradition, we have not lifted up Mary as much as the Orthodox tradition or the Catholic tradition. We don't have a discipline praying and saying, "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee." But let me say that we affirm without question that God found favor with Mary and that she was chosen to be the mother to Jesus. Mary is indeed blessed. She is the mother of the incarnate Word. So what we do know is that Mary was poor, unwed, and pregnant, somewhere around 12 or 13. We know that she was a member of the oppressed race as a female. And so poor, unwed, pregnant, and oppressed, she's the one that God finds favor. And she begins this song and she sings out of the justice of God's inbreaking realm. In spite of everything that Mary knows to be true about her world, she sings out. For at the core of her song is an invitation to recognize the coming of God. She sings out to the world to help them see the light of Christ's coming. So the first candle really is a candle of Mary's faith. And the second candle is the candle of Mary's joy. Because it's an Advent song for us, because it invites us to look anew at our relationship with Christ. Now, Mary's song is also known as the Magnificat, or the Latin word magnifies. It's the phrase, "My soul magnifies the Lord." It's a phrase sung by another pregnant woman. Any guesses? Bad Bible teachers. Hannah. And Hannah is the mother of Samuel the prophet. Now, as we learned in the Brilliant Children's Sermon, the word magnify can be used in two different ways. It can mean to make something appear greater than it is, like those small words on that little tiny book, a microscope or a magnifying glass does that. Or it can make something that seems small or insignificant appear to be as great as it really is. And that's what a telescope does for us. It helps us to see the magnificent universe. So there's two ways of magnifying. There is the microscope magnifying and the telescope magnifying. One makes things that are small look bigger. The other makes big things begin to look as big as they really are. But we also know there's another potential that a magnifying glass has. It can focus a bright light into a tiny, tiny, hot point of intensity. Now, you remember trying to start a fire using a magnifying glass, tissue paper, and it works. Trust me. It can concentrate light into this one single brilliant point. And I heard a pastor talk about Mary being a sort of magnifying lens that gathered the light of God's light and love and brings it to a single point of great strength, of great brightness, and brilliant intensity. So I started tarrying with this thought, perhaps as ridiculous as it may sound, we too could gather the light of God's love into a greater strength, a greater brilliance, a greater intensity, and bring it to people in our lives, in our community, and in our country, and in God's creation. We too could be God's light to those who live without the conveniences that we take for granted, like food and water. Like Mary, we too can gather the light of God's love and shine it on those who have been pushed to the margin of society because of the situation or their immigration status or because the labels placed upon them by the powerful, the elite, and even the religious. We too, like Mary, can gather the light of God's love and shine on those who are oppressed, who are treated with suspicion because of their race or gender or sexual orientation, and always treated less than who they are. We too, like Mary, can gather the light of God's love and sing an Advent song, longing for the day when justice will roll down and righteousness will become an ever-flowing stream. Like Mary, we too can gather the light of God's love, and through us, through the world, through the way we choose to live our lives, the way we practice our faith, can encourage others to glimpse that light, experience the righteousness of God's reign, and share God's joy. So like Mary, we too gather the light of God's love, and that always brings joy. Because joy is the result of magnifying the love of God. Christ is present, bringing the fullness of God's love. In singing Mary's song, it can only provoke and release the joy that is deep within. So we know that happiness, we're going to switch to joy now. We know that happiness and joy are not the same thing. So as a noun, joy is defined as an emotion of great delight, happiness caused by something exceptionally good or satisfying, keen pleasure, elation. It's been said that joy indicates something deeper, more embodied, more acute. It is akin to being alive. Joy is being alive. It is linked to what we feel in our bodies, what we feel in our communities, what we feel in the beloved community of faith. And it arises out of this deep interpersonal connection and experiences of loving and then being loved. Joy has this expansive, ever expansive quality. A sense that there is enough. In fact, there is more than enough joy to go around. It's a theological concept. It's not a cultural one. It's conceived out of the Greek word for grace, which means joy is not human-based. It is the awareness of God's favor. It is recognizing grace. So we can think about joy being an embodied awareness of the holy presence of God and the extravagant love God has for us. So communities like here at Pine Shores, where grace of Christ is recognized, joy overflows. It's intentionally fostered. We cultivate joy, and it becomes our response, an enduring response, because we need to express joy in our world. In an article entitled "Toward a Theology of Joy," the author writes this: "Joy is joy because it understands and responds to that which God desires for the world. Wholeness, abundance, justice, peace. Joy is therefore a response to external circumstances and is shaped by them. Joy is the appropriate response to the well-being of God's world." Joy expresses itself in shouting and laughter and singing and in celebration. Joy celebrates the goodness of God. That's the gift that we have this Advent season. It's just to remember the goodness of God. Rowan Williams, the recently retired leader of the Anglican community, once said, "The church of the future will do both its prophetic and its pastoral work effectively only if it first concerns itself with gratitude and joy." The gift of joy is not a trivial matter. Joy is not an extra thing added on to ministry or to a life, like icing on a cake. Joy may seem unrelated to the seriousness of real work, of real life, but it is not. Joy is the component of attentive and engaged human living. It enlivens and sustains us and flows through our communities as life-giving. Joy is right at the heart of what it means to be fully alive. We have been created for joy. And in this season of Advent, we are abundantly reminded of that. One of the old rabbinic tales says that Moses asked each person the question, "Did you enjoy everything that God gave you to enjoy?" Let me just simply invite you to look for joy and to search for the hand of God at work in your life and in this world. And let our souls magnify the Lord. And let our spirits experience joy. God's goodness is here, it is there, and it is everywhere we go.